hard knock fighter, Odorski.
You see that you can throw a punch. You make too many.
We are getting a fair share of it here, cage side.
By Odorski.
Greg Large.
Odorski another shot to the
Great combination. Stevens
Put my head toward my corner. You'll be able to hear Lee Mean and the guy.
Just feeling out strikes. He's really finding the range.
And here's a big shot. That might have broken his nose. That is great.
McKenzie not doing too much in terms of.
Kimura attempt, shaking his head in frustration, and the Crimson Mask control Odorski means nothing as he is victorious in his amateur debut.
I guess my fitness journey started probably when I was about 13 or 14, trying to join the gym back home in Otascombe with my older brother so I could play football. And obviously didn't know much of anything back then. Did lots of bench press and arm curls. And then as I progressed in football and kind of got older in life, you just picked up different things. But I wouldn't say it's probably not until my mid-20s to early 30s that I really started taking it serious and trying to learn more about the training principles and what your body can do and that type of stuff. So pretty novice for a lot of years. Growing up, obviously a huge fan of Mike Tyson was probably the first thing that got you into the sports. But playing hockey and football, didn't really have time for it. And then when I decided to leave the oil patch and go to college, I just said to myself, I want to learn to box. So I joined the Lethbridge Boxing Club when I was like 23 or 24. Did that for a year, competed in a tournament, did 6 months of kickboxing a year later, and then really didn't do anything for probably a solid 5 or 6 years at least. Obviously followed boxing and mixed martial arts, being a fan of the UFC and stuff, and then one day, and I think it was July or so of 2011, I just said, you know what, I need a change from lifting weights and kind of your bodybuilding type fitness, and went down to the Canadian Martial Arts Center, signed up, did a noon kickboxing class, purchased my membership, and been there ever since. The influences before I made a switch was, like I said, I just followed the sport and really enjoyed it, and always wanted to train that. When I got hired with the city of Lethbridge, one of the guys in my recruit class, Brent Lorenz, had done significantly more grappling and wrestling than I had, and so we kind of started hitting pads, and kind of through him was my first introduction to grappling. We would do some grappling and jiu-jitsu stuff together and with some other guys. So I guess he was my very first influence that taught me just the very basics. And then obviously once you sign up at CMC and you start hanging around some of those guys, training with them, there's a lot of influential people then that really pushed the journey. But I would have to say the very first one would have been Brent. Challenges that I faced when I first started my mixed martial arts journey, I think a lot of people face some, especially if you're a guy that's played some sports growing up, been in law enforcement for a little while. I think it's your ego. At the time when I first joined the Canadian Martial Arts Center, I was about 220 pounds, pretty strong guy, and that was my whole goal, is to be strong, and you're pretty proud of that fact, and you think you can you think you're kind of more than what you really are, and then you walk into this gym and there's people of all different body shapes and ages, and guys and girls, and they're tapping you out when you grapple, and little 135-pound guys that are 10 years younger than you are throwing you around like like you're a baby, and people are doing the same thing with the stand-up game. And I think that it takes a lot of discipline to say, I'm going to check my ego at the door today, and I'm going to embrace in this journey. And I think when they fail in this journey, and that's the initial onset of, you walk into this gym and you look at some of the people and you go, yeah, like this guy will never be able to do this or that to me, or this girl will never be able to do this or that to me, and they do it, and they do it quite easily. And if you're not ready for that mentally, or okay with being broken down and learning something, then I think your ego it kind of ruins it for you right there and can set you back. So for me, it was that, you walked in there and thought you were kind of something, I don't want to say special, but you have your own opinion of yourself, and then to see everybody in the gym just lay it on you for weeks, and in my case, just the way I was able to train. I trained with some high-level guys right off the bat, so it was months of really just getting beaten every day you showed up there, and you have to be willing to accept that. And I think the number one challenge for everybody is, you know, am I willing to put my ego aside and come learn something and be humbled and not sometimes humiliated in front of people. So when I first started training, you know, I didn't really have any goals other than I wanted something different. And because of the atmosphere that my coach Lee Mean created there, I fell in love with the sport, and I just wanted to get better. And training with guys like Jordan Mean and Brant Dewsbury and Derek Boyle, they pushed you, and you just wanted to get better. And as I got better, you know, guys would be bugging me about fighting, and you know, my workplace at the time wasn't a fan of it. It wasn't something that was really on my radar. And then I just, you know, through lots of different people in my life kind of pushing me in the direction of, hey, you're probably better than you think you are, and you should really give this a try, and getting to corner some guys. I just thought, you know, I'll probably regret the rest of my life if I'm training 6 days a week with, you know, guys that are high-level mixed martial artists, and I never give it a try. And you know, sat down with my family and said, you know what, I want to do it once. You know, I'm training with really, really good guys. I'm going to be really prepared. And so the initial plan was just, let's get in there one time, see what happens. Part of wanting to get in the fight was at that time learning some of my own personal fears and my own strategies about mental preparation. Mostly I wanted to see how the mental preparation side for a fight I could translate into my full-time job. And you know, I wanted to see the parallels. And you know, one of the things that I'd always talk about with my coach was it's not really a skill until you can do it when it really matters. So we can rep stuff out in the gym, at work we can rep stuff out down at the range or whatever the case may be, but until you can do it, I'm against somebody that's not letting you do it, and there's some pressure and stuff involved, you don't really know if you have that skill. So I guess I just wanted the one time to know, win or lose, what my skill level was like. For my first fight, when I first got in the ring, you know, it was a weird feeling, because I think because of what I do for a living, some of the stress and anxiety wasn't there, whereas some other people might have had it. And I remember being really nervous leading up to my first fight, you know, doing my normal work and sitting on night shifts in my car thinking, oh, man, I can't believe like soon I'm going to be standing in my underwear in front of a bunch of people, and I could get humiliated in front of my friends, and what will people think of me? And then, you know, you battle that, and then, you know, just got up there, started doing our interviews, of course went through weigh-ins, and it was just like, I remember seeing him at weigh-ins thinking, yeah, he's as nervous as I am. We're just two people. You know, it all just kind of went away. And I relate it to like at work, you know, you mentally prepare for a high call, all the training, and then you just go, and you just, you know, you get to the call and stuff just happens without you thinking. And that's what I believed the fight would be like. We just got to the arena, we started warming up, and we started walking out, and it was just like in my mind, I had been there 1,000 times. And when the fight started, there was like that initial, you know, minute where the nerves are there, but it's like, I've been here so many times in my mind, so many times driving around in my truck at night at work, that, I don't know, it was just natural. And the anxiety, for me anyways, I didn't notice it in the cage. It just felt very natural to be in there, and it was like that's where I was meant to be at that moment. I won by submission with the move that I'd repped out 1,000 times, so in my brain, I had believed that, yeah, you know what, I'm going to win this fight by a Kimura at some point. It's kind of interesting, you know, I'd had some mental visualizations of there being blood, and there was, I was bleeding terribly in that fight. I'm not even sure what caused me to bleed, but it was just weird the way it played out, because I remember thinking, yeah, I'm going to win by a Kimura, it's going to be bloody. I didn't think the round or anything like that, and it kind of played out in the way I had envisioned in my mind, and in some ways it didn't, but in many ways, for that particular fight anyways, I felt like I knew that that's what was going to happen. So after my first fight, the training differences that I would say was we emphasized a little bit less on weightlifting and more on conditioning. Not that I was out of shape for that fight by any means, but just being in that very first fight ever made me appreciate the conditioning that's needed to compete in mixed martial arts at the amateur level, certainly at the professional level. So we kind of strayed away from doing, you know, your heavy lifting, powerlifting stuff, trying to keep me naturally walking around at the weight I was going to fight at. and we just focused on being, taking some time to work a technique, but when you start the fight camp, just to be in the best shape that we possibly could be for the day of the fight. To me, I think as a fighter, whether you're a pro or an amateur, I think being out of shape is kind of like the cardinal sin, and that was something that I never wanted to be. And I'm okay losing. I'm not okay losing because I'm out of gas and I didn't put in the work, and so that was kind of always what drove me. So in between those fights, right up until the end of my amateur career, it was always about being in better physical shape and just tweaking a few of aspects of my game. But conditioning for me is the thing that I pride myself the most on. So after my amateur fights, again, it was just kind of like, I had my fights and I'm like, yeah, I did it. I did what I wanted to do. And then I guess just, being a Canadian kid that thinks you're going to play in the NHL until you realize how much of a long shot that truly is. I wanted to be a professional athlete, and this was my chance to do it in my own way. And so I just sat down with my coach and said, what do you think about taking a pro fight? And he said, absolutely, let's do it. So we did, and that there's really not, there's no bigger backstory than that. In my own mind, I thought, I want to do this professionally. It's not about making money for me or anything like that. It's just something I wanted to do. My coach was on board, and we started my professional journey. My fight with Greg, a few things. It was, my first pro fight. You got to respect anybody that's willing to get into a cage and engage in a fight with somebody, no matter what skills they bring to the cage. And I mean, I knew he's a bigger guy than I am, and I knew that he could, had some good power in his hands, and that standing with him would be not ideal for me. And so the focus of that one was just to get in there and grapple and just keep improving on my grappling and my ground game and beat him that way. Part of it was, about being a pro is I couldn't wait to throw elbows. So, not to sound sadistic or anything, but I threw a lot of elbows on the ground in that fight, and that was kind of one of my goals for that. And it was good. He's a really nice, really good guy, and it's a good learning experience. It showed to me that I'm not big enough to fight at that weight class. So again, something to learn is that for my next pro fights, or if I continue to fight pro this year, I need to be down a smaller weight class in 185. So that kind of taught me that, you're not big enough to be there. And it also taught you the pro game is a lot different than the amateur, right? The 5-minute rounds and stuff. It's no matter who you're in there and against, it's a step up from where you're at. My second pro fight was on Unified against a guy by the name of Josh McKenzie, who had quite an established amateur career, and I think it was 1-0 when we were both 1-0 when we had our first pro fights. It was my first fight where I actually had to cut weight, cut weight, not just not eat for 2 hours and but actually do the fast and the weight cut part of the sport, and that's something I wanted to do, right? I wanted to experience as much of the sport as I can. So for that fight, the first weight cut ever in my life was an interesting experience. Also, I think Josh is about 6'3", maybe even a little bit taller. A new experience for me, and also a guy with a very decorated grappling jiu-jitsu background from a great gym up in Edmonton, the Hayabusa Center. So again, all different challenges, right? I've been in some tough kids for sure, some tough guys. Eric Stevens, very tough, good, solid on his feet. But for this fight, Josh was a grappler, and I remember watching an interview where he wanted to win by submission, so it was kind of like my A game against his A game. That was a good learning experience, and that one was a little bit different too, because for me, I wanted to not rush. If you've seen me fight before, I tend to throw a couple punches and clinch and get to ground, but knowing his background, I wanted to try to keep it standing, and in my mind, leading up to that fight, I wanted it to go at least one round, have a smooth round on the feet. It didn't go so smooth. So he easily took it to me in the first round. But yeah, so there were some differences there, and I wasn't wanting to rush to get to the ground with him as much as I was with some of my other opponents. So again, another learning experience for me, right? Trying to fight a guy significantly taller and dealing with the range of his punch and kicks was something I never had to deal with really before. My influences right now, obviously, if you've ever spent any time at Canadian Martial Arts Center, it's hard not to be influenced in some way by Lee Mean. He's a genuine human that cares about you as an athlete, as a person, cares about your family once he gets to know him, and it just, I think he's just turned 53 and he's still in there competing, and he's, you know, there's days when I, like at my age, I'm 42 and I don't feel like training this hard, and then I head down to the Canadian Martial Arts Center and there's my coach who's, you know, 10 years on me and has 4 hours of sleep in there, rolling and training and teaching for 8, 9, 10 hours a day sometimes. So he's a huge influence as far as, you know, a guy that's in his 50s and in great shape and still going hard. And I think too often we hear, you know, I'm too old to do this, I'm too old to do that, I can't do what I used to do. And Lee has really showed me that a lot of that is your mindset, right? Even if you're 40, 50, you can do a lot of things, maybe not as good as you could when you're 20, but you can do some things better, and you can certainly keep pushing yourself physically and mentally as you grow older. And I've learned that from him. And then, I mean, obviously there's this, you know, Derek Boyle is a huge inspiration for me as a friend and as a fighter, to see how hard he's worked and some of the bad luck he's had in his career, and it's never stopped him. You know, he had a tough run there for a little bit, and I think lesser people would have packed it in. And you know, he just kept pushing, and if you saw his last fight in December, it was a thing of beauty. And so it's people like that, right? Like, that remind me why we get into the sport and remind me to keep going, whatever I choose to do when times are tough. Because if you put in the work, eventually you're going to get to the results you want. So right now, as far as fighting, those are probably the two biggest influences I have. My future goals, you know, I love the sport, I love training. I think if the right fight comes up, we'll take it. I love coaching. I love coaching up and coming fighters at the gym. I love coaching the guys that have more experience than me. I wouldn't really say coaching, but I love being around the sport. I love the road trips. I love the corner, and I love meeting the different fighters across Western Canada. I've got an emphasis right now in my life in trying to teach what I've learned back to some of the people I work with. So we're running weekly classes down at I guess at the police station for some of the guys I work with, just to break up their fitness routine. And I mean, I'm not kidding myself. I know I'm not going to fight in the UFC or anything like that, but I still think I have a lot left to learn from this sport, and I have a lot to give to people in my community and the people in my circle from the lessons I've learned from this sport. So, you know, I want to coach. I want to get teaching more, and obviously, you know, by doing that, I'll always be in shape, and when the right fight comes up, I'll be able to jump on that.